everybody. I'm Danielle Love, founder of the Sacred Sexual Energy Experience program, and I am here today with the Real Life Sex Chat Show, where what we do here is we talk about everything that has to do with real life and sex. And sometimes that is an unpleasant and uncomfortable conversation, but those are the types of conversations that, well, if you know me, you know I kind of thrive in having. So I am here today with a good friend and an amazing client, Ina, who is a longtime government employee and also a craftswoman extraordinaire who makes just absolutely stunningly gorgeous things from her craft room. And sometimes I wish I could craft anywhere near as amazingly as she could, but I digress. So she is here to share her story with us today. So Ina, thank you for joining me today. How are you?
Thank you. I'm doing great. Thank you for having me.
It is my pleasure. So in the Sacred Sexual Energy Experience program, which Ina just finished going through, we do a lot of trauma work. We do uncovering, unearthing, revisiting, and of course, compassionately looking at the wounds from our past so that we can create some spaciousness for new, healthy, generative energy in our lives. And through that process, Ina has shared with me and the group a lot of very personal experiences that she has had. And we've also come to the conclusion that we all agree that it is healthy to talk about these experiences and also to share them outwardly when we feel comfortable to contribute to the collective energetic healing of the world. So I'm going to let Ina go kind of from the beginning where she feels comfortable, and I will kind of interject with questions as it organically unfolds. So Ina, take it away from the beginning as we've tried. This is the second take, by the way. The internet said, no, we're not doing this, but we said, no, internet, this is happening. So take it away, Ina.
All right. So my story kind of begins, I think I was around 4. My mother went to visit her great aunt. No, it was her aunt, actually, aunt and uncle, my great aunt and uncle, for like a family picnic or cookout, and kind of just dropped me off and didn't come back. And there was another child that lived in the household. She was 8. And I can remember a couple of things prior to that age, but not very many. One thing I remember was my mother actually using intravenous drugs, like injecting something that I'm pretty sure wasn't insulin in her arm. And there were a couple other things, and nothing that was like abusive or anything, but just a couple of just flashes that I remember as a child younger than 4. So really, I feel like my life began, so to speak, when I was abandoned, dropped off at my aunt and uncle's house. So they weren't prepared for me. I can remember initially sleeping literally in a chaise lounge that was made, it was outdoor lawn furniture. They brought it in the living room and I was sleeping in that because they had an extra room, but they didn't have like a bed or anything in it. So that was, that was fun. It was like camping out or something. After a while, I think I could recall asking like, where was my mother? When was she coming back? And there was never anything nice said. It was always, she's good for nothing. She's a drug addict. I remember them even saying that she's probably a hooker, like just all kinds of stuff. And so eventually I just didn't ask. So over the years, I discovered that they went through the process to legally adopt me. And they had their other child, the 8-year-old. And to me, I always felt like we were treated very differently. And I always thought we're being treated differently because that's their birth child and I am not. So I started school in the 6th grade, not in kindergarten, but I can remember like being taught my ABCs. I had to know my ABCs and 1, 2, 3s before I could go to school. And it was very traumatizing for me, one of many traumatizing events growing up, because I was like, I can remember like literally being drugged in the house because I didn't want to do it. I wanted to stay outside and play. We lived in the country. I can remember literally being drugged in the house to sit down to, practice my alphabet and my numbers. So that was just one of many events. My uncle was an alcoholic, drank heavily, some sort of liquor and beer, also smoked cigarettes in the house. At that time, there was no such thing as smoking outside. My aunt was always a nurse and she worked mainly at night from what I can remember. She worked in the hospital or she did private nursing and her schedule fluctuated, but a lot of times she worked at night. There were many incidents. One very significant I can remember I actually was telling Danielle when I was coming on when we were coming on for this, I was snacking on I'm sorry, no, it wasn't you, it was somebody else. I'm sorry. So I was snacking on potato chips. Like potato chips have been one of my favorite snacks all my life. So I eat them in moderation, but I'm probably 5 or 6 years old. No, I'm sorry. I was 8 because I was in second grade. So I'm sitting in this little chair against the wall. I have this big bag of potato chips in my lap. My uncle gave me, just said, have a few. And I remember him specifically say, don't rip the bag, because I'm little and I keep putting my arm down in the bag. And little by little, the bag does rip. I'm sitting in a chair up against the wall, and I go to get up, and I'm trying to like ball the bag up so that he can't see that it's ripped. And he takes my head and bangs it up against the wall over and over and over and says, I told you not to rip the bag. But then, of course, I've dropped the bag. The potato chips are all over the floor. He hits my head against the wall so many times, it makes a hole in the wall. And I have handprints. When I looked in the mirror later, I could see handprints and scratches on my face. Now, my aunt wasn't there. She was working that night. So the next day, at the time I had very long hair, the next day my uncle tells me, when your aunt comes home from work, just, hold your head down to shield the fact that I have still handprints on my face. So I did that. And eventually my aunt at dinner says, like, what's going on? Like, get your hair out of your face. Like, what is happening here? And when I lifted my head up, she's like, oh my God, what happened? So I told her what happened. My uncle doesn't say anything, doesn't apologize, nothing. And instead of her, saying something, them getting an argument about it, something, the next day before I go to school, she puts foundation makeup on my face and tells me that's pretty much the same thing he tells me. Hold your head down. Don't let the teacher see it. If anyone asks, just say that you and your sister got in, an argument or a fight or whatever. So I go to school and I just hold my head down and nobody notices. Nobody says a thing. So I'm like, okay. So that was when I was in second grade.
And it's just say, from all of the work that I've done in the trauma-informed community and hearing what you're saying and what we've discussed together, you and I, and in the group, just the hearing you iterate this story this way. And for people out there who may be watching who either have experienced something like this themselves or are parents right now who don't have the level of emotional intelligence or maturity necessary to be a healthy parent, this is what I would call a teachable moment where your aunt and uncle were clearly not mentally, emotionally, spiritually prepared, not only for their own child, but for a second child. And also when you came along, instead of, right, I'm not saying that I know what their situation was, right? But they didn't learn anything new. They defaulted back to what they were taught by, I'm sure, their parents. And that was violence. And that was silencing. And that was covering things up and sweeping things under the rug. And what we're doing here right now is doing the opposite of that. We're shining a light on this, and it's okay to do that. And I just want to say how grateful I am for your ability and your willingness to do this, because I really do think that this is so incredibly important for people. So please continue.
Okay. So there are a couple other standout incidents. One I can remember, at the time were living in Virginia, and it was wintertime, cold. We had cats. We had cats that kind of like just came and went. They were inside, sometimes outside. So it was cold. One of the favorite cats we had, he was a black cat with white. I named him Puffy. I don't know why. And it was cold outside, and he was standing at the door from the back porch, and he wanted to come in the house. And my uncle had said, don't let the damn cats in. So, but nobody was looking. I let the cat in. That one cat, that was the only cat that was trying to get in. I let him in. So my uncle, he didn't hit me that time, but we had like blinds between the windows that went like from the house to the back porch. He pulled the blinds up. He took the cat out. First off, he was swinging the cat around by his tail, beating him. And it wasn't the cat's fault. It was my fault. So it was awful to watch.
I can't even pretend like I could imagine. I can't even pretend.
He killed the cat.
Hmm.
I felt really bad. Sorry.
Don't be sorry for having emotions. And I know it probably is not particularly helpful, but what happened to that cat was not your fault by any stretch of the imagination. That human being that was or is, is your uncle? Is he still alive?
No, he's not.
Okay.
Thank God.
Yeah, right. Yeah, he was very mentally ill.
Yeah, he was
Deeply,
very,
deeply mentally ill.
yeah, he drank. Like when he wasn't drinking, which wasn't that often, he was a decent human being. Like he would joke around, but I could tell immediately the difference in his speech, of course, because it would be slightly slurred, and his walk because, he would be stumbling around. I could tell immediately the difference. So there were very few times when I felt like he was just a normal, lucid, non-alcoholic. And at some point before I even started school, which I started first grade, he started sexually abusing me also. So he died when I was in seventh grade. So I think I was 13. And on his deathbed, he did ask for forgiveness. And I just looked at him and walked out. He died a very short death from pancreatic cancer, very short, painful death. And, I don't want to say he got what he deserved, but I felt no sympathy, no sadness. I actually felt, it's bad to say, I actually felt some joy.
I don't know if that's bad to say. I mean, there's a German term. It's called Schadenfreude. And it's essentially, we don't have a word in English to exactly encompass it, but it's essentially when somebody who's clearly a horrible person, who clearly treats other people and beings like animals really horribly, when energetically the karma comes back around and a person that has possibly been a victim of that energy that they were putting out sees that, you feel a sort of joy for it. And although that may not be how we want to feel, I would like to acknowledge that that's okay. And actually fair. I don't like the word normal, but I experienced that as well.
Yeah.
That happened. So
yeah.
I get
it. I don't know that I found joy at the time of him dying a painful death, but I did find joy that I didn't have to worry about him anymore. Because I was getting older and he was trying to do more things to me and me do more things to him sexually. So I was happy.
Yes. Understand.
I was happy that he left this earth because I was at the point where I was contemplating different ways to kill him. Seriously.
Understood.
I was like, I'm going to sleep with a knife under my pillow. And tonight, if he comes in my room, I'm going to stab him until he can't breathe. I'm going to sleep with a pair of big scissors under my pillow. So tonight, if he comes in my room, I'm going to stab him until he doesn't breathe. I'm going to find sleeping pills that my aunt has and put them in his beer so he goes to sleep and never wakes up. Like I, on numerous occasions, thought tonight's going to be the night he's going to take his last breath, and I'm going to be sure of that.
Yeah,
I'm tired of dealing with it.
Yeah, there's no part of me that doesn't think that that's completely understandable in every capacity. Like nothing that you're saying feels like in that situation that having those thoughts or those feelings or planning those things was wrong. It's self-preservation. It's self-protection. Like that's, nothing there is surprising or to me wrong. I mean, I can't imagine feeling any other way. So.
Yeah. And my aunt did absolutely nothing to protect me. Their other child was very rarely ever hit. He hit me and slung me around the room so many times. And I can rarely count the times on one hand that I at least can recall that he hit their other child. And my aunt would protect her, like literally like protect her, and then take her in the room with her and shut the door and lock the door so he couldn't get in.
Yeah.
I was like, so needless to say, as I got more mature, I became more rebellious and very disrespectful to her. Like I couldn't stand her. I used to call her names and then when he died, I really just checked out of that whole household. I'm like, I don't like her. I don't want to be around her. She's worthless to me. Like she did nothing to protect me at all. And then I still was viewed as the bad seed because my mother was, so from what they say, a drug addict and possibly a prostitute. And according to my aunt, I was going to end up the same way. And she said that because I wasn't a straight A student like the other child that they had. I was an average student. I excelled in choir, but they never supported that. They never came to any events or anything. But I just was like, she's not a good person. So as soon as I could get out of that house, which was at 17, I got out and I went back briefly one time for a visit and I cut my visit short because I'm like, she's the same person. Mm-hmm. I thought now that I had distanced myself for so many years and I came back as an adult, I could, talk to her as an adult and she would treat me respectful. It was that completely didn't happen. She still would like cuss and fuss and cuss me out over the least little stupid thing. I was supposed to go for 5 days. I think I stayed for 2. And that was in the 80s. And I never went back. I never got in touch with her. I needed to just discontinue that relationship completely.
And I think it's so great. I don't know if that's a good word for it, but that you were able at that young age to recognize, because so many people, they get sucked into this, we're blood, we're family paradigm. So we have to repair things. This person's related to me by blood. So for some reason, people get into this mindset where, well, you have to put in all this extra work and you have to minimize yourself and your own emotions just so that you can keep this amicable relationship with somebody because they're blood related. And I'm just going to say, I say, fuck that. I have had that ideal my whole life. And not that I'm quick to cut people off, and also at the same time, in my own family, my sister was a heroin addict. I have a cousin who's also in a very, a lifestyle similar. And I have completely, and my sister's passed away, by the way, but even back then, even when I was younger, I knew that being around those people was not an option for me. I'm not going to put myself out there to continually be in the energy of that toxic energy just because we're related by blood. To me, that belief system or that way of living is so detrimental to so many people. They feel this, I don't know what it is, a pull or an obligation. So I'm just saying, thank God you knew that none of us are obligated to that, by the way. That's just a narrative. That's just an idea. It's not actually true unless you commit to it. But I'm glad you didn't commit to it. And I'm glad that we share that, because it's like, no, we don't. No, absolutely not.
Like once I separated myself from that situation, at the time we were living in New Mexico, I came to the DC area where my family is. And I was talking to my family that I was staying with. And there was, at that age, I was 17. And all of a sudden these new revelations came out accidentally, that the child that I grew up with that was 4 years older than me, that I thought was treated better because she was their biological child, I found out at 17 that she was adopted. We grew up together in the same household, and I never knew, and they never discussed it because they brushed everything under the rug. They never said anything to me about it. I was like, what do you mean? My cousin accidentally said something, well, because she's German and French, she's white and you aren't. But my aunt was Black. And I'm like, what do you mean she was, their other child was German and French? Like, how could that be? They're like, well, she was adopted at birth from one of your aunt's friends. I'm like, what? We grew up the entire time in the same household, and that never came up in conversation.
Yeah. Like
crazy shit. They were batshit crazy.
Yes. Agreed. 100%. And also, we have a lot of people in the world who we would categorize as that. And so I just kind of want to say that you can come back from that. Like, and so in that energy, for someone like you who experienced all of this traumatic exposure on so many different levels at such a young age and continuing through your childhood, how do you feel that it's possible that you are who you are today? Because I can just say, from someone who's had the pleasure of both working with you professionally and also like listen, we've traveled abroad, not necessarily together, but kind of like we were in Copenhagen together multiple times on work-related things. We've hung out, we've both been in professional environments. We've also been out to dinner and having drinks together. And I can say with complete certainty that your heart is so beautiful and so pure and so generous and so kind and empathetic and giving. And like, you just couldn't even fathom treating anybody like in a nasty way. How does that happen? Is it a learning experience, seeing what you were exposed to and knowing that you never would want to treat anyone else or cause anyone else to feel that way? Or what do you, talk a little bit more about that.
When I separated myself from them, from my aunt and her child, I lived with my cousins and their 2 kids. It was a husband, a wife, and 2 girls. And they did stuff together as a family. When I got there, like the next month, they were already planning a trip to Niagara Falls. So I thought, well, I wonder who I'm going to stay with. Or, I'll go to my aunt's house down the road. They're like, what do you mean? No, you're part of the family. You're coming with us. They did stuff as a family. And I had never done stuff like that. I'd never experienced that, me personally. And, just as I matured, I just knew that the way I grew up, I could not repeat that cycle. I couldn't. Like, I never, ever now, I will say, though, my daughter recently has disagreed, that I didn't think I was a great parent. And for a long time, I thought, I don't want to be a parent because I don't know how to be a good parent. But I did become a parent. And I never, ever hit my daughter. I believe I did have some anger issues, but not that I cussed at her or anything, not like my aunt. Now, my aunt that I grew up with, she wasn't a hitter, but she was definitely a verbal abuser.
Emotional abuse can sometimes be much more painful.
Yeah, she verbally abused me and mentally abused me, like cussed and just like downed everything that I did, everything that I didn't do, like everything. So I was like, yeah, I'm not going to be that person. I'm not going to be that person. I'm not going to treat my daughter like that. It's ridiculous, the shit that they did.
Yeah.
And we talked about the sexual abuse. Well, at a very young age, I already had oral sex performed on me. I was in elementary school. And in elementary school, I also was forced to perform oral sex on my uncle. I was in elementary school. And every time my aunt would go to leave the house, I would always ask her, can I go with you? Because I didn't want to be left alone in the house. She would always take the other kid, but would leave me behind. And I would dread it every single time because I knew that was going to be an opportunity for something else to happen. Like, she would be gone 5 minutes and he'd come looking for me and get me by the hand and, have me give him a hand job or have me give him a blow job. Or it progressed when I was in 4th grade to him telling me to lay on top of the dining room table so he could perform oral sex on me. And I was in 4th grade. And I tried to tell my aunt on numerous occasions that I didn't want to be there by myself with him, that he would say things and do bad things. And she just would never put any stock in it. And then she even went as far as saying, you make things happen to you. Like you're bringing that energy onto you. I was like, are you kidding me? I used to cry and beg, can I go with you to the store? I would ask her and she would be like, no, I don't feel like being bothered, and leave me at home. Now, also, you should know that they never, ever slept in the same room. Never. They always slept in different rooms. And years later, I found out it was just a marriage of convenience. My uncle, the man that she married, he was Filipino. And she apparently met him through a friend, and he needed a green card and guaranteed her that he would provide some financial, stability for her because he was a good financial provider. He was in the military, but not like the U.S. military. He was in some branch in the military, but he was on disability, so he had a check coming in. So when they adopted me, then that was another check they would have coming in, because we were under 18. And then the other child that they had adopted, they were getting a check for her. But I learned years later that it was a marriage of convenience. They never, ever slept in the same room. They showed no affection towards each other.
Well, of course not. He was a fucking child molester. Sorry.
Yeah.
Obvious, yeah. Mm-hmm. So,
right.
I mean,
right.
I know you know this, and I mean, obviously, maybe you don't, but like, you know that none of this was your fault, right?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. It was hard for me to understand why it was happening to me and only me. And I knew it was only me. It was hard for me to understand why it was happening to me and only me. So when she said that a few times, like, whatever's happening is happening because of you, it made me really sit back and think, like, what am I doing? So it made me have low self-esteem. I used to walk around with my head down all the time and wearing like baggy clothes or just like something that wasn't appealing in my eyes so that I wouldn't be appealing. And I was in elementary school.
Yeah.
And he just was, he would yell at me or raise his hand when I was in elementary school. And as soon as that would happen, I would pee on myself. Like, I peed on myself so many times. Like, he would just get up and like be coming across the room and say something to me, and I would pee on myself. And then I would get in trouble and get hit because I peed on myself and messed up my clothes. I'm just like, it was a vicious, vicious cycle.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. And from what I know from your experience, and I think that a lot of women, especially women, but I also, and just to be clear, I am very close with multiple men who are also victims of childhood sexual assault. So I know that this kind of doesn't just span the female side, but something that happens, and you brought this up, and I think this is actually important as far as kind of bringing to light what the trauma responses end up being, even and after the exposure to the trauma, even and after the recognition of the trauma and admission of knowing that it's not your fault, there are still going to be ongoing and lingering symptoms of that. And I think, I don't know if we've actually ever talked about this, but it's popping up now, is that we've talked about how you used to be quite a bit heavier and you have been on your own kind of healthy look, releasing excess body fat and things like that. But when you said about dressing in an unappealing way because you were told that your body was wrong, just because you had that body, that was the body that God gave you, or however you want to call it, that was the problem. So you began doing what you could to shield it so other people didn't find it attractive. And a lot of times women who experience obesity, particularly throughout their adult lives and starting when they're in a teenage life, that is a symptom of childhood sexual assault. And what they're doing is they're protecting themselves. They think the more weight they gain, the less attractive they will become to possible predators. Do you feel that that's something that you experienced from that? Or did you ever put those two things together just out of curiosity?
No, not at that time, because I was slim and I used to be a runner. I didn't start gaining weight until I was probably like 35 or older. And it was actually because of a health problem that I had, a disease I had, and I didn't know at the time.
Okay.
So, when I was younger, I was very slim and an avid runner. And I was on the track and field team, like one of the stars of the track team in middle school and in high school. So I was slim, but I always felt like I didn't want to be noticed. And I didn't look like a lot of people around me. I grew up in New Mexico. I have curly hair. My hair was like big and wild, and I didn't know how to take care of it. Now, my aunt, though she was Black, she didn't want to be Black. And she reinvented herself when we moved from Virginia to New Mexico and told people she was Puerto Rican. Now, her skin tone was much darker than mine. And she had coarse hair, but she wore a wig all the time to cover the texture of her hair. I have curly hair. My mother is Black, very fair skin. My father is Puerto Rican from pictures that I've seen, and I know his name. But I had curly hair. I didn't have a clue how to take care of my hair. My hair was crazy looking, crazy and bushy and dry, and didn't know what to do with it. But I didn't look like anybody around me, really, not much. So I just was like, I was looking crazy. And I didn't care. But it wasn't how I wanted to look. Like, I very much to this day am still a very dainty, girly girl. Like, I can swing a hammer, but I really prefer, flowers and a dress and being cute. But I went for years throughout school, in elementary school, middle school, and even in high school after my uncle passed, just not, I won't say not caring about my appearance, but not putting my best foot forward and not wanting to look appealing, because I felt like I was a bad person. I made this happen. And then my aunt repeatedly would tell me, like, whatever happened, I don't know what it was. It's, it's probably your imagination. It's your fault.
Right.
And when I told somebody at school, I told the counselor in school in 7th grade that I was being hit at home and I was being sexually abused. She called my aunt in. My aunt told her I was a professional liar. And then I got sent home from school. The counselor believed my aunt and said that I shouldn't have done that and I should never speak so ill of them. And they did a favor, by taking me in and providing a roof over my head. And I was made to look like I was a liar. So after that
lesson. Yeah. I mean, for anyone out there who is in a position where children are coming to you as a counselor,
right.
Believe them.
Right.
That's it. End of the story. Like, I mean, I don't even know who that counselor is, but I want to smack them in the face.
Right. Like there were incidents later on where I ran away from home and just was like spending time with family because I'm like, now that her husband is gone, she's not home a whole lot. She didn't cook. The one thing I can say for him, he could cook and he cooked well. He would cook like anything and everything. He was a chef in the military. So that's the one thing I can be grateful for. Like there was food in the refrigerator. When he passed, I just would have to eat something out of a can, heat it up. This was long before microwaves, heat it up or eat it out of the can. There were days that she wouldn't even come home because she got a social life after he passed and she would never allow me to have a key. So I would sit outside the house for hours and hours and finally would just give up and go to a friend's house and just stay at their house until she got home. And I would keep calling the house and then I would come home. She wouldn't say anything like, I'm sorry, like, have you eaten? Nothing.
Yeah.
I'm like, this bitch is crazy.
Yeah. Well,
and I tell so many teachers what was going on and she still was very verbally abusive. And they would go to her and she would put on this, perfect prim and proper appearance. And then I was the bad seed.
Yeah.
So that's why it was awful. So when I was 17, she called my family that my cousin in DC she was close to previously. She called her and said, she needs to just talking about me. She needs to be gone for the summer. Like I need a break. And I was like, thank God. When I came to DC and I stayed with them for a month and I begged them to please let me stay with them. Please don't let me go back. And they were like, well, we're going to have to ask her. We don't know how that's going to work because you're still in school. And when they called her and asked her, she said, okay, no problem. Let me send her shit.
Yeah.
And then she went on to say, you'll be lucky if she gets out of high school. She's going to turn out like her mother, good for nothing. And my cousin that I was living with at the time, she was just like, what is wrong with you? Like, you haven't changed. So that's when we had this like hours and hours long conversation. And she said, unfortunately, a lot of us in the family thought there was stuff going on in the house. We weren't really sure what. We thought that your uncle was abusing you, like hitting you. We didn't know anything else. And we knew that the lady that was raising you as your mother, your aunt, we knew she was very verbally abusive because she always was like that. But there was nothing that we could do about it. We didn't feel we could do anything about it because they adopted you. Like, what were we going to do? Take you in or have you go into foster care? Like what, there wasn't anything we could do.
Right.
So, but my cousin that I live with, she decided that no matter what, she was going to fight for me to stay with them. And I did. I finished my senior year of school. And to this day, she is like my mother. Her husband is like my father. And her two daughters are like my sisters. We are super close.
Yes. Good. Well, I'm glad you found, and that's, we talked about this in the group about the adverse childhood experiences. And for anyone out there who's not familiar with Nadine Burke-Harris and The Deepest Well and the adverse childhood experiences study that was done in the 90s, and it's much more prevalent today. You can just Google it. One of the things that helps kind of counteract the long-term traumatic effects of the adverse childhood experiences is having positive childhood experiences. And one of those is having adults that you can turn to that will actually listen to you, that actually take an interest in you, that actually care about your well-being. And I'm glad that you were able to find that, even though it was a little bit late, but at the same time, that I'm sure contributed to your ability to function in the world today in the ways in which you do and you are and you continue to do. I think a question that I have that I genuinely don't know the answer, like for you, what advice do you have or would you give to, first of all, someone who, let's just say now, that might be watching this, and just think about who might be watching it, and people who are connected to me might be women who experience something similar to you, as you, something that they've had as a child, but they haven't really talked about it openly, or they haven't been able to really just express it outwardly. What kind of advice would you have for somebody in that situation who's still kind of keeping it all on the inside?
I think for one, if it's at all possible, get out. No matter the age, no matter the, the situation. I know some people as adults stick around because of, financial reasons or for the kids or something. It's not going to change. Get out. And then if you're younger and you are still living at home with the parents, you have to learn to talk about it. Like, talk about it to anybody that will listen.
Yeah.
You can't just brush it under the rug, because it is not going to change. No matter how many times that abuser, in whatever form or fashion they're abusing you, no matter how many times they say it's not going to happen again, it's going to happen again.
Yeah,
Get
absolutely.
out.
And then what if there's someone like that's maybe your age, they're in their 30s, their 40s, their 50s, their 60s, however old they might be, and the people that they've already experienced the abuse from are gone, but they may not have talked about it with anyone. Would you recommend, therapy, or at least having, for me, it would be, because I can't speak to this. I did not experience childhood sexual assault. And also I have worked in very close therapeutic proximity with countless human beings who have, and helped them process this. My thought would be that at least finding one person that you can tell everything to could be life-changing. Would you agree that, like, finding someone to share your experiences with?
Oh, I absolutely do.
No matter what age you are.
Right. Oh, yeah. Right. No matter what age. I think definitely it is helpful to talk about it. If you're not in a financial situation, I think to go to a, therapist or something like that, then maybe just find a group of people, some sort of group that you could go to where there are other people that have experienced some sort of trauma at whatever age. It definitely is helpful to talk about it, because for a long time I felt like, even as an adult, I would think about stuff, and for years I never ever divulged any details, never said anything. Like I said, my family that I lived with, I didn't give them any details. I just said, it was an abusive situation at home. And then their response was, well, we thought there was something going on, but we weren't sure what. And we never discussed it in detail. But being able to be in an environment where you can discuss those things in detail with others in a non-judgmental form, it's very, it was very lifting. I felt very relieved to be able to talk about it, and then found that I didn't want to stop talking about it.
Mm-hmm.
So I have
that other people experienced it, right? And that, like, kind of reduces that feeling of like, oh, this is just me. I'm the only one who has gone through this, right? Like that collective energy of other people knowing that, not the same experience, but they experienced something pretty terrible too. I mean, I think that we can just relate this back to the diabetes community, not that comparing the two, just things that are ongoing and can be traumatizing when you have a person or a group of people where you can just regularly vent, right? It's like a release valve, right? Like, because if we don't let it out, it just keeps building, the pressure and the pressure and the pressure. It keeps building. And then all of a sudden we're just this like volcano ready to erupt of like anger and sadness and frustration and just all of these other things. So yes, I agree. Group or one person or whatever it may be. Somebody is out there to hear you. Yeah. So what other advice do you have? So now you live a life, from my observation and having been blessed to spend, private communal time with you, where you listen to yourself. You hear whatever it is that you're desiring. You honor your body and your mind and your spirit and your creativity, and you embrace all of those things. Were you always in that relationship with your mind, body, spirit, where you're like, I embrace all of the things and not kind of trying to shut yourself down so you can conform to, you know, what society thinks you should be? Because I think you're like the opposite of that, which I love.
No, absolutely not. I think for years, I really didn't care about myself personally.
Okay.
And I didn't, and I didn't take care of myself. Like I didn't exercise. I didn't care what I ate. And I knew diabetes ran in my family, but I was like, yeah, whatever. That's not a problem that affects me. But my mother actually died from complications related to diabetes. That much I did know. Um, and I was just like, you know, whatever. I'm just going to do what I'm going to do. Now, I never used drugs, and I just was like, in my head, I keep hearing, you're going to end up like your mother. So I keep saying, okay, so I don't want to end up like my mother. Seriously, I can tell you on one hand how many times I've even smoked weed because I'm just paranoid. I don't want to be a druggie like my mother was. So for years, I didn't do stuff like that, but I just really didn't care about myself or taking care of myself. And things didn't really click for me. Even when I was diagnosed at 35 with diabetes, they still didn't click. I went for years where things were pretty well managed on paper, but I wasn't doing anything about it. And then little by little, the weight I just kept on packing in the pounds, just kept on packing them up. And then finally, I don't know at what age, maybe like 45 or so, I just decided at that point that I didn't like who I saw in the mirror. Now, as a person outwardly and overall, I had become a very giving person. I do a lot of volunteer work. I make things and I never sell stuff. I give everything away, but I still feel like I wasn't taking care of myself. I'm the first one to run to somebody's corner if they need help, and I'm willing to take care of them. If you're sick, you have the flu, you need soup, I'll crochet you a blanket, like whatever it is, I'm going to take care of you. But I wasn't taking care of me, and nobody else was taking care of me either. So I just decided in this close-knit circle of friends at work, we were going to go on this weight loss journey and support each other. And it was such a great experience. There was probably like 5 or 6 of us, but we were there with each other at work every day. So we were supporting each other all the time, every day. And that helped me jumpstart my weight loss. It helped me start watching better what I eat because I was being held accountable. Like I couldn't hide it. I was right there at work. So then those practices spilled over into my home life also. So again, I paid a little closer attention to what I was eating. I started just walking around the building and within the building where I worked at, and then outside the building. And then, and then I actually liked it, and I could walk a block. I started off literally walking a block and jogging a block. And at first, jogging one block was really hard, but I was able to get to that point, and that helped me jumpstart my weight loss. And it just made me feel better about myself, and it made me want to do more for others. And I'm so grateful for that. And I don't hold myself accountable for any of the bullshit that my aunt and uncle put me through. They both have passed. Neither one of them, like my uncle did ask for forgiveness on his deathbed. My aunt, I never gave her the opportunity to, but she had the audacity. Well, I guess her daughter had the audacity in her obituary to list me as her daughter and list her as a selfless, devoted mother. So it's funny, the cousin that I lived with in DC, she sent me a copy of the obituary, and she said, check out this piece of fiction. And I laughed so hard. I was like, what is this? And I'm reading it. I'm like, are you kidding me? Are you kidding me?
It's amazing the lengths people will go to preserve an image.
Right. Exactly.
Not the truth of complete like veiled bullshit, right? Like, let me print this in the newspaper as if that somehow makes it any more true.
And it's so ironic because they put me down, and she put me down verbally so much growing up. And their daughter, the daughter I thought was her daughter, was older than me, was a straight A student. She was a valedictorian. She went away to med school, and she had a nervous breakdown, and she wasn't able to graduate college, and had some drug issues, like all kinds of things. And, I'm sorry, years later, I kept thinking, that's karma. Like they never had anything positive to say about me. And I can say there are lots of things that I, have done maybe that I'm not proud of, but the person that I've grown into, I'm proud of this person. I had nothing to do with them at all. And I'm so glad I separated myself from them completely. And I'm so much a better person for it.
Yeah. And I think that's so important what you just said about every single one of us, including me. There's no human that doesn't fall under this category has done things we're not proud of, period. End of
Right.
sentence. Like there is no but and also to that. No human that exists right now, ever has existed or ever will exist, will go through life saying, I haven't done some things that I'm not proud of. And guess what? We might still, we
Right.
humans, we are going
Right.
to, right? We're going to experience is often our driver. And even if we do have an intuitive kind of uh, information that we don't want to do, so we're still going to do stuff we're not proud of, and that's okay. I think that that's such an important thing. You kind of just said it because it was true to you, but I just want everybody out there to understand you're not alone in having done shit that you're not proud of. We are all under that umbrella, and then following it up with you're very proud of who you've grown into today. For anyone out there that may not be feeling super great about who they are today, right? Who they feel like they are, it's never too late, right? Like give yourself some grace, right? Give yourself some space, one step at a time to grow and evolve, even though you've been through hell, even though the trauma has been there. There is an opportunity to shine light on it, right? And I don't know how it's always going to work out, and also if you give yourself that space, usually something positive will emerge from your willingness to sit with your emotions, right? To not necessarily damn them all the time, but just say, hey, I'm feeling this way. I need to share this. And now that I've shared it, listen, it's not going to be easy, but it will definitely open up some space for healing that may not have had that space to exist before you opened it up. So yeah, wow. I don't even know how to bring this to a close. Tell me, like, what are there any other lessons or like top things that you would communicate to people who are victims of childhood sexual assault, emotional abuse, mental, spiritual abuse, that may still be struggling today? Any words of wisdom or like guidance that you feel might have been particularly helpful to you before you knew what you know now?
No, I mean, besides me saying just use your voice, I wish I would have used my voice more, maybe to some family members or something. And, get out. Like, it's easier to say now than then. I was too young to leave, but I should have spoke up to other family members outside of the household, and maybe things could have changed. My uncle repeatedly would tell me also if I told anybody that I was going to get taken away and put in a foster home. And, a foster home was like the worst thing in the world. And often I would lay in the bed thinking, is it worse than this? Really? Where I'm getting hit, physically hit, verbally abused, mentally abused, physically abused, sexually abused. Is it worse than this? Really? And he would make it seem like because we lived in a house and we went to private school for a while and we had food on the table and, like I should be grateful for that. And with everything that came with it, that's some bullshit. To this day, I'm like, use your voice, speak up. It's not okay. It's not your fault. And get out if you can.
Yeah. And also to the adults, because the reality of children watching this episode here is very low, but the reality of adults who might be outsiders to a household where they have an intuitive suspicion that something might be going on in that household. I would just add trust your gut. I don't know exactly what that means for you individually, whoever you are that's watching this right now. But like Ina said, her family thought there was something going on, but there was nothing that they could do. But maybe there was something they could do. I don't know what. I really don't. I don't have a suggestion. But follow your gut, follow your intuition, especially when there's a child involved that doesn't have the legal and or physical adult attributes to fully stand up for themselves. If you're a counselor or you work in a counseling aspect, I think things are very different now, or at least I'd like to hope that they are, that if a child comes forth and speaks, there's a lot more laws in place and there's a lot more levels of investigation that are likely to happen if a child does step forward. But as soon as a child says anything to you where your spidey senses go off, don't brush the senses under the rug. You might be the person that's the catalyst to propel this child outside of this environment, whereas they might not be able to do that if you don't. And I know it might feel scary, and it might feel like you're being invasive, or it might feel like you're out of place, or like you're not, you're stepping over a line or something. Step over the friggin' line when it comes to
all growing up. I was never asked, are you okay? From like outside of my household, nobody, not a friend, not a neighbor, not a classmate, not a teacher. Nobody ever said, are you okay? There was an incident I can remember at night where my uncle just went ballistic about something and ripped up everything in my room, like kicked holes in the walls, like kicked the bed, like broke the furniture, everything. Kicked me out of the house in the rain at night in my underclothes. And I went to a neighbor's house that was 4 houses down and knocked on their door. They let me in, no questions asked. And to this day, I still communicate with the girls in the house that are adults now my age, but they never asked, like, what's going on? Do you need help? They knew stuff was going on, but they never would ask. But the parents always said, you can always come here, you're safe. So at least I had that.
Yeah.
But nobody ever did anything about it.
Yeah. So yeah, this is more for the adults that are watching that may happen to be overseeing, or somehow, I don't know, you just get some inkling or some interaction with a child, or just, follow the thread, right? And even if it feels like you shouldn't be, or it's not your business, it's like, no, humanity is all of our business. Treating other people with kindness and empathy and not abusing humans is everyone's business. And if we all collectively actually acted that way, maybe we wouldn't be in as much of a shit show of humanity as we are in right now, where people are just like so concerned with only what's going on in their little circles, but anything outside of it is like, that doesn't belong to me. That doesn't pertain to me. That it does. It does. And so
I agree.
Yeah. I mean, thank you for sharing this. I mean, I can just say, and I'll say it forever, I'm just so grateful that you're here, that I know you, that our paths crossed. Being in your energy has never been anything but a blessing for me. And for anyone that I know that we know in a same circle feels the exact same way about you. You're here for a reason. I think you know that now. But if nothing else, you have become an absolutely stunningly beautiful person. And it is my blessing to be a part of your journey and to know you. So thank you for sharing this. Thank you for investing time and attention and all of the other things that you have into your own healing, because by doing that, you're now here sharing this with me, and I'm going to share this with other people. And I'm sure that this is going to touch somebody's life. I don't know.
I hope it does.
I'm sure it's going.
And I'm welcome to answering questions or talking about it again, like whatever. If there are questions that come to you from this interview, feel free to pass them on. I don't have a problem with answering or helping anybody I can.
Okay. Well, you heard that here, you all. So whether you're watching this on Facebook or whether you are watching this on YouTube, which are the 2 places that I will be posting this interview, whether you leave a comment underneath, or if you want to send me a DM on Facebook, or you can email me at love@daniellelove.com. If you have a question for Ina, or you'd like to be connected to Ina, I will happily make that connection as per her permission. So thank you for that. There very well may be somebody who would like to connect with you on this. So that's very generous of you.
No problem.
So thank you, Ina. Thank you everyone for watching. I look forward to seeing everybody on the next episode of Real Life Sex. Sometimes real life sex ain't cute, but it's still real life, and we're still here to talk about it. And I'm always going to talk about it. So thank you, Ina. Thank you everybody for watching. We'll see you next time.
Thank you.